So are all scandals created equally, and what will happen to the president's agenda and beyond? And some good news for the president that's taking second stage. Those are the hot topics today coming from our panel covering progressive issues. Erin Carmone is a writer for Salon.com. Taegan Goddard is editor of Political Wire and author of Roll Call's Wonk Wire. And Judd Legum is editor-in-chief of Think Progress. Gang, it is great to have you here. And Erin, I want to start with you about this because it really is an interesting question about whether or not all scandals are created equally. And we've got this new RNC web video that's out today demanding transparency. We just had Sean Spicer on a moment ago talking about this. Where does the buck stop at this White House? Take a look, though, at the new web video.
The way to make government responsible is to hold it accountable. For a long time now, there's been too much secrecy in this city. I will also hold myself as president to a new standard of openness.
Those are the president's words, Erin, from 2009. Are they going to come back to bite him now? Has he done enough to stay in front of these issues that kind of keep coming left and right in the days to come? I mean, this is only Wednesday, and it's one hell of a week so far.
That's true. Thomas, I think that there's a temptation to kind of tie everything up in a neat bow and say, scandal, all of these issues are exactly the same. But let's be clear here. With Benghazi, Republicans have not really found a smoking gun. I don't even understand what they are accusing the president of doing. With the IRS, there are troubling questions about whether Tea Party groups were targeted, but we also don't have the full story yet, and it seems like it was limited to low-level employees. With the AP, to me personally as a journalist, it is more disturbing that there is a serial pattern in the administration of going after leaks and whistleblowers. Unfortunately, you know, for Republicans, it would be pretty hypocritical for them to pretend to care about it since they called for the investigations in the first place. So I think it's one thing for them to call the president out. It is absolutely necessary for them to make him accountable for previous comments, but they're hardly ones to throw stones.
Well, sure. It was last year, roughly about this time, that the right, that is, was asking a lot of questions of the White House, and the fact that it had a problem with leaks and trying to get to the bottom of it. They even accused the president of being the one in the administration of setting these leaks out into the public on their own. But I want to play Judd Eric Holder responding to the question over civil liberties and what this administration feels toward those. Take a look.
I'm proud of what we have done. The policies that we put in place with regard to, let's say, the war on terror. We decided that certain interrogation techniques were not going to be used. We have been, I think, very aggressive in our enforcement of the civil rights laws.
All right, so there they have a lot to be proud of. But, Joe, when it comes to the AP situation and the fact that we know that Eric Holder has recused himself of this, and we're finding out more and more about what these subpoenas meant and what they were able to get, we don't have any more information about were they able to find a whistleblower. Would that legitimize any of this if they were able to then bring somebody forward and say, well, we plugged the leak because of such and such?
I don't think so, because I think the concern is just with the extraordinary breadth of this subpoena, multiple phone lines over a couple of months, and I think people are concerned, and rightly so, about the chilling effect on investigative journalism, which is really a hallmark of democracy, the chilling effect over the long run, which I think outweighs any individual leak. So to me, this is the most disturbing of the scandals, but it's also important to remember this is the one that is hardest to connect back up directly to the president, because, as there should be, there's a division between the president and the White House and the prosecutorial decisions on individual cases made by the Justice Department. You wouldn't want the president saying, here's the case you should prosecute, here's how you should prosecute it, and getting involved in those kinds of decisions.
No, a division more like a firewall. Taegan, let's talk about Charles Krauthammer. You turned me on to what he had said on Fox, saying that the one bit of advice I give Republicans is to stop calling it a huge scandal, stop saying it's Watergate, stop saying it's Iran-Contra, let the facts speak for themselves. Have a special committee. Basically, don't overplay your hand on this, because there is a lot of opportunity, a lot of ground to be gained by the Republicans on this. And we had Senator Roger Wicker on the Daily Rundown talking about what this means to the Obama agenda moving forward. Take a look.
I can't imagine that this IRS scandal and the controversy surrounding the overreach and intimidation by the IRS is going to do anything but pour cold water on the president's attempt to raise taxes as part of a grand bargain.
All right, so let's talk about that. How does this really push the progress of what the president has. And there's very short time taken before the midterms come up for the president to get anything done, especially when it comes to immigration reform, which people thought that we could get done because of the bipartisan agreement, but even on gun reform and whether or not we can see a grand bargain.
I think that's absolutely right, Thomas. I mean, when you look at, all scandals are obviously not created equal, but when you look at the totality of what we're dealing with and what the White House is dealing with this week, it's very clear that this is all anyone's talking about. The president can try to talk about immigration reform. There was a major markup in the Senate yesterday. Nobody paid attention to it. He can try to talk about background checks. There are several senators trying to cut a deal on background checks, gun sale background checks. That's not being talked about today. All anyone's talking about, and all the Republicans particularly want to talk about, are these scandals, and particularly the latter two, the IRS situation as well as the AP wiretaps. Those things people are very concerned about. And as long as they're talking about that, President Obama's agenda is sidetracked right now, and it's going to be very hard to get that back on track until we stop talking about these two issues.
Well, hopefully we can get some facts that come forward that help deflate some of the attention, but they are necessary topics that need to be discussed because obviously they have the media's attention, they have the left's attention, they have the right's attention. Judd, one thing you talked about that really is getting no one's attention right now is that the budget deficit reductions are coming in way lower than forecast in February. This would normally be really hot news to talk about. However, it's really making back burner when it comes to where we are today.
These are really dramatic new numbers, talking about a revision in this fiscal year of $200 billion lower the deficit's going to be than we believed just a couple of months ago. And then by 2015, we'll be talking about deficits in the realm of $300 billion. And the scandal that no one is talking about is in the face of this, with millions of people still unemployed, with the unemployment rates up over 7%, we're not doing more to get people back to work, and we're still focused on deficit reduction when we see that even projecting out over several years, it's even a conservative economist. No one would argue that these levels of debt that we're seeing, in 2015 now are not at a sustainable level.
Aaron, is there a way for the Obama administration to pivot off of that news to try to steal some of the attention away from AP, away from IRS, away from Benghazi? I mean, Benghazi's not as topical right now because of what happened with the AP, because of what's come forth about the IRS.
Thomas, I wish the case for this sort of deficit hawk hysteria had anything to do with facts. I mean, we just saw one of the major papers that was brought up as a rationale for this obsession with cutting the deficit and the debt. We saw that disproved. So unfortunately, this has always been about a radical agenda. Today, this afternoon, House Republicans are going to meet to continue, at the leadership of Paul Ryan, to continue with their agenda. Frankly, being concerned about the deficit sounds better than saying let's lower taxes on the rich and starve the poor. But I doubt we're going to see that ideology going away anytime soon, what with the House control by the Republicans.
Taegan, what would you say? What could the White House do to steal back some of the attention to steer it in a positive direction?
Well, I think the first thing that I think many people have looked at is that the President Obama did not respond to the IRS situation quickly enough. Obviously, yesterday and again today, he's responded forcefully. He's got the Treasury Secretary on this situation. So I think what most Americans are looking for is that if there's a problem, that he addresses it quickly and that he moves on. There's some hints now that there may be somebody fired at the IRS for some of the problems identified in the Inspector General's report that came out yesterday. Those types of things will help him move on from this issue. I think the issue regarding the Associated Press, that might linger for a little bit longer. But the more Obama speaks about his agenda and the things that he needs to get done, if you go back to history, it was very successful for Bill Clinton to talk about the work he had to do for the American people. If President Obama does that as well, he might be able to move on from this scandal as well.
Our agenda panelists today, thanks so much for your time. Aaron Carmon from Salon, Taegan Goddard from Political Wire, and Judd Legum.